Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kat, and today I am doing a wrap-up of 6 books. So I'm gonna talk about two DNFs first, and then the 4 books that I finished. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first DNF I want to talk about is Pretty Evil by Zoe Rossi. So this one really caught my attention because I recently, maybe it's just me, or I'm so slow, but I recently was made aware of like the good for her horror fiction TV movie trope. So if you don't know, good for her is like when a woman gets calculated revenge or she's driven into defending herself and ends up like completely killing like everyone else. It's basically like good for her for doing what she needed to do. Anyway, turns out I have loved that all along my whole life. So basically every book I almost ever read is good for her, and that I'm drawn to has good for her elements, some more than others. So this one is about a woman who was essayed in the past, and her present is that she basically hunts down predators and wants to murder them. So immediately I'm like, yes, absolutely yes. It sounds like Promising Young Woman, the movie, only instead of just sending them to jail or threatening them, she would kill them. So I was like, immediately yes. But okay, here is why I DNF'd it. Despite the fact that the plot is right up my alley, the writing style is a little rough. So the way that the author writes is really all about brands and brand names, because the female main character is like an editor and is into fashion, which I totally get. So she's talking a lot about brands and about image in society, which I understand is probably a comment on the duality of like her nature. However, this is also why American Psycho didn't work for me, if you've ever read it by Bret Easton Ellis, because I think at least the first third of the book is this same thing, where you're getting to know the character. He's superficial and really loves like designer brands. He's obsessed with putting on a mask and integrating into society and being of a certain like status. And I just really, I'm bored. So despite the fact that the first kill was awesome, like bow and arrow awesome, I DNF'd it because I was like, I hated being stuck in her head, which is really sad. So anyway, if you have any good for her books to recommend me, please do. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a good for her video pairing books with my favorite good for her movies and TV shows that I watch. Yeah, because obviously I watch the same kind of stuff that I read, and I thought that would be so fun. I've watched some amazing things recently. Anyway, so that was a DNF. Okay. Next up, the other DNF is A Soul to Heal by Opal Rain, and this was a massive bummer because the first book was one of my best romances of last year. So this is in a world where there are humans, but there is also this veil, and monsters live in the veil. In this one, a woman's sacrifice is thrown into the veil. She's basically pushed off a cliff. She falls onto a monster known as a Duskwalker, which the origin of them is quite cool, quite Ghibli-esque. There's lore. I'm not going to get into it because it's a spoiler for the first book. But in this one, the woman who's sacrificed, she has like deep depression. She's really down on herself because her society has basically told her she's not worthy, and this Duskwalker is a young creature who hasn't yet gained all the knowledge he was going to gain before looking for a human mate. So he doesn't fully know how to live with a human. And this becomes a problem, and the reason why I DNF'd it is because they eventually have sex. He doesn't know what's happening. He runs out. He's angry. He's confused. Turns out from that time, she gets pregnant, and it just really, capital really, rubbed me the wrong way, because he doesn't even know that what they did was like sex, and then he doesn't even know what pregnancy is. So I really didn't like it, because it honestly, to me, he's not a child. He's not a child. He's like an adult creature, but because the creatures gain knowledge through the creatures they consume, he hadn't yet realized like sex and sexuality and what it even feels to have an orgasm. Like, he'd never had one before. So it was just like really yucky. And that the first time she'd get pregnant, because now she's like, oh, she's like, I have a reason to live because of her pregnancy. And I'm just like, also, I don't know. Those are not things that are making me feel positive about this romance. And in fact, I really don't want to read it. This one is just not it for me, and that's fine. So skip. All right, so now we're getting into the books I did finish. I want to talk about Woman Eating by Claire Coda. This is a modern millennial vampire story where we're dealing with a vampire who is raised with a mother who has a lot of self-loathing, and the mother believes that the only blood they should consume is like the blood of creatures that are not revered, almost as a punishment. So usually like pig's blood or dried blood flakes or like blood sausage. And when she consumes the blood, she can feel and sense the life flowing out from the blood. So like she knows the backstory of the animal. But she mostly tries to not eat at all because she hates that part of herself. And she also wants to eat human food, but it makes her sick. So she just mostly tries to not eat as much as she can. And I've heard that this is, and it's true, that this is like an extended metaphor about eating disorders, wanting so much to eat but not being able to. And the other part of this is that while she is in an art scholarship program, her mother is alternatively in a hospice care for being sick and elderly, and her mother isn't really that sick and elderly because she's an immortal vampire, but her mother does kind of keep forgetting to not mention that she's a vampire, so she keeps asking for things that she shouldn't, but luckily, because she's in a dementia ward, the doctors just think like she's just talking nonsense. So as she's doing like her art scholarship, she's also dealing with what she should do with her mother, what she should do with a boss that's maybe too handsy, what she should do with friendships of people that are in the same art space that she's working in. And it's more about that than about being a vampire. In fact, I think being a vampire in this is more about gaining your own individual power than actually being like an immortal being. So overall, I gave this 3 stars. I thought that it was quiet and it is very slow. So if you're looking for like a unique take on vampire lore, this could be for you. However, if you're looking for like an action-packed vampire story, this is not it. This is not it. So yeah, I was left feeling a little unsatisfied, but I'm not that mad about it because it was still quite a cool read, if that makes sense. So next, let's talk about the short story collection that I recently finished. This is Taktumi, which is an anthology of Arctic horror stories, and every story is written by a different author. This was so good and very, very strong, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So the themes, like it says, is Arctic horror, and it ranged anywhere from zombies to curses to giant bloodlusty polar bears that live deep in the ocean. So I think the easiest way to explain it is that they all deal with Inuit and Arctic Circle legends and mythos, and they're all usually set in a cold climate. There's either snow or like just ice. And there's a lot of living off the land, using snowmobiles, hunting. A lot of the stories gave the vibe of, oh gosh, what's the one? The Only Good Indians. So I think like if you really liked The Only Good Indians, where people make a mistake, they done fucked up, and there is going to be some sort of supernatural retribution, this would be for you. There are monsters, there are curses, there are just supernatural forces, there is a lot of gore. A lot of gore. And I will say that there are animals that are injured in these stories, which is not one of my favorite things to read, but it definitely fits with the theme of just everyone is getting messed up all the time. Yeah, and so this was really, really good. Really, really good. It might be one of the best short story collections I've read so far this year, if not the best. All right, next I want to talk about a romance. So this is Pretty Policeman by Pfeiffer Rose. And this was so good. I ended up giving this 4+ stars. It might even end up being a 4.5. It's one of the best romances I've read this year. So this is about Detective Micah, who is undercover trying to catch a serial killer. And he goes undercover as a sex worker, and he's standing on this corner and it's freezing outside, and he's waiting to be approached by who he hopes is the serial killer. But in fact, he is approached by Damon Romano, who has his fingers in a lot of mafia pies, let's say. And he wants to buy Detective Micah dinner and get him somewhere warm. And of course, Detective Micah, acting as a sex worker, trying to attract a serial killer, is like, no, that's fine, just move on, no thanks. But Damon won't take no for an answer, and he's like, okay, well, I'll buy your time then, and we'll just eat. So the detective is like, okay, he's gonna blow my cover, like if I don't go with him, right? So he ends up going with him, they end up getting dinner together, and then they become intertwined. And it's so, so good, because I read a bunch of romances lately where when someone's in the mafia or someone is like an enforcer or something, the author kind of skips over them actually being really brutal and really badass. I think Alessandra Hazard is the one I'm talking about. I was so disappointed. Anyway, so disappointed. But in this one, Damon is actually like a proper, unflinching badass. And that comes into play later on once the serial killer like comes into the narrative and everything gets totally messy. But what you have at the heart of it is a mafia person who wants to help this sweet, sassy sex worker. That's what he thinks, at least. And then this detective who's undercover is maybe starting to catch feelings for this mafia boss, but also he's trying to catch a serial killer. So he's also like, there's like this push and pull where they want to get together, kind of, but they know they shouldn't, or at least the detective knows he shouldn't. The mafia guy doesn't know that he's a detective, obviously. So it's just a bit complicated. But yeah, I really, really love this. This is one of my favorite romances of the year so far. So if that sounds like what you'd be into, definitely check it out. It was really, really good, and I will read more from this author in the future for sure. All right, and now we are to my favorite of this bunch. This is Anatomy, a Love Story by Donna Schwartz. Oh, baby. So if you recently watched my most anticipated recent releases, I will leave the links for it down below. The number 2 in this series is coming out soon, and I'm just so very excited because the first one, this one, was absolutely amazing. So we are following Lady Hazel Sinnott, who wants to be an anatomist, which at that time was code for a doctor. And she wants to go basically to the Anatomy Society and learn how to dissect bodies and how to perform surgery and become an anatomist. However, women are not allowed. So she goes undercover, dressed in her dead brother's clothing, and she's just acing it. However, when her identity is revealed, she's kicked out. However, she's told that she can sit the final test, and if she passes, she will be offered a rare scholarship. However, in order to pass, she needs first-hand experience with bodies. Enter Jack. Jack is a resurrection man. I love that name so much, and it means grave digger, not grave robber, because they take the corpse naked, because otherwise they can be charged with grave robbing, and I didn't know that. That's such a cool fact. Anyway, so he digs up corpses for money, and he decides to help Hazel get the corpses she needs to study. However, people are also going missing in the slums in the city that they're in, and he is noticing, she's noticing, and something bigger is afoot. This book was so freaking good. I really, really recommend it. I want to do a recommendations video soon for books that are similar or like TV shows that are similar. So I'm not going to say any right now. That will be coming later, probably once I read the second one, because I'm just so very excited for it. I'm not gonna give any recommendations, but if you like what I mentioned, then this book could be for you. I will be reading the second one shortly, and hopefully it's just as good. So, without further ado, I'm gonna say bye for now. Those are all the books I've recently read. I am nearly done reading a bunch of Captive Prince dupes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will leave the video link down below. I found like over 50 dupes for Captive Prince, and I'm gonna read some of them that are recommended and see if they hold up. Yeah, so also look forward to that, and I will talk to you in another video soon. Lots of love. Bye!